Okay, hello and welcome everyone. This is really great to have you, all of you here on a Saturday afternoon, maybe the night time in US. I'm very happy to be a moderator for this panel. The topic for our panel discussion today is writers as thought leaders. And as you will see during the course of the panel discussion, all of us are writers in some way or the other. And obviously, when we write something, our prime objective is to be thought leaders, try to influence our target audience with our thoughts. And as they say, a pen is mightier than the sword. So all of us are into this initiative with the premise that our pen is mightier than the sword. So without further ado, today I have four fellow panelists with me. One is will be joining a little late. So I have Karthik, I have Akshat, and Pratik with me. All of us are, goes without saying, we are all IIT alumnus. I am from IIT Delhi, batch of '97, passing out mechanical engineering. I'll tell you a little bit more about myself as we go along. Okay, Harsh has also joined. Welcome, Harsh. So I'll start with asking Akshat. You know, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, about how your writing journey has been, what has motivated you to start writing, and how do you see yourself influencing your target audience?
Sure. Thanks, Ashutosh, and thanks for introducing all the panelists. To begin with, I'll just give a brief intro of myself. As you rightly pointed, I'm a fellow IIT Delhi alumni, and I graduated from mechanical engineering too, by the way, in the year 2010.
Okay.
And actually, the seeds of my writing journey began in IIT itself. I've actually been a very active author in my school. I've even been an awarded author by Hindi Academy. But then, as studies take over, you kind of give up almost everything. So I revived everything back in college. And it so happened that after graduating from IIT Delhi, I worked in an investment bank for a short while, which was a campus placement. But then immediately I got a master's offer, so I went abroad to US specifically to study there. And it so happened that when I was graduating from my MBA in the US, a colleague, a friend, a classmate threw a party to celebrate, the graduation, and there I met a friend of his who was a very intellectual person and had a lot of, respect for the Indian engineers, but was of the opinion that despite the economic growth, not much of innovation is actually coming out of India. Of course, as a proud Indian, I differed and I tried to kind of back my argument with the, a lot of examples on the services side, but I actually kind of faltered, to find product based innovations out coming out of India. So I came
Mhm.
back home, researched online, and I really found 20, 30 odd people who were doing amazing product based research which could scale into products of global appeal, not just to developing countries like India, or were kind of
Mhm.
jugaad of the Western innovation. But I
Right.
thought, I mean, unlike the Western media, the Indian media does a very poor part at bringing out the positive stories, especially
Mhm.
in a society which lacks innovation in general, and is not really that focused on innovation, I would say. I mean, taking a less traveled path is not always appreciated, right? Which is something that forms the backbone on innovation in general. So I had already been actually writing blogs, etc., which were getting a lot of audience. So I talked with a couple of friends, and they said, if you have to, if your goal is to reach out to greater audience, probably blogging is not the medium in India, right? I mean, a book would definitely not be still selling like million copies like in America, but at least you will reach out to a few hundred thousands
Mhm.
maybe. So with that thought, I started reaching out to these people, talking to them about their journey, their struggles and their triumphs finally, right? How they did what they did and the background that they came from. And I started writing their bios, and that I compiled over a period of 2 years into a collection of stories which formed my book. It was released in 2015 and received amazing response. It went on to become a bestseller. I got
Wow.
invitations to talk at several forums,
So
and it started.
what's the title of your book, if you may tell the
Yeah.
audience?
The title is Indian Innovators. It is published by JACO, which is one of the top five publishers in the
Right.
country, and it is still very much in prime display in the airport bookstores,
Mhm.
etc. And of course, you can read the reviews online. It's very well reviewed, and the best part is being able to bring out the change, and it's actually inspired by a very personal journey as well. While I was in IIT, I actually built prosthetic knee joint, which was a novel
Okay.
knee joint design, which was meant to be much more cheaper than all the other alternatives available in the markets in developing countries. But more importantly, it was more functional, right? I mean, you could mimic the natural gait of amputed person at a fraction of the cost that is currently available in market, the options. So but unfortunately it so happened that the whole project was kind of usurped by some stakeholders, and it did not really go down very well, and we abandoned the whole idea. We were close to getting a patent. We exhibited that in the open house at IIT, and then we thought maybe this is not what we want to do. Maybe we'll just go for a job and get a cushy job, and what it is for most people at IIT, right? But then when I went to America, I realized, I mean, America is America primarily because the kind of intellectual property rights that they have, right? I mean, people innovate because they know it's not going to be usurped by their guides or their project advisor, etc., etc. People get credit for their work, and that intellectual property actually pays them eventually, right? So looking back, I thought I had really made a very poor choice for myself, right? So I did not want other people to kind of fall into that trap and to have role models, which they can look up to, people like their own selves who actually innovated, built products and built businesses around that product, right? To scale it up, take it to the market, and make money for themselves and actually do some good to the society as a whole. So that was a
Sure.
whole
So that's really great to know, Akshat. Really inspiring. We are already feeling inspired after hearing about your book, and we'll feel more inspired if we read it. So tell me, in terms of readers' feedback, what kind of direct feedback did you receive? Did you receive any direct feedback from any of your readers as to how they got
well,
influenced?
yeah, right. So, I mean, for me, the highest, moment was, it's a very, very interesting anecdote. And I'm sure all of the other IITians here would definitely feel good about hearing that particular story. So it happened that there is a IIT alumnus, 1990 batch electrical, I guess, if I'm correct,
Hmm.
or maybe 92. He's currently
20 years
heading
senior
the
to you.
very,
20
very
years
senior.
senior to you. Okay.
Correct. Yeah. And for us, I mean, I think for all IITians to get kind of acknowledgement from somebody who's so senior, it's like sort of a dream come true. Sort of
It's a
any
validation.
amount
Yeah.
of money or award would not probably replace that feeling. Anyways, so he's heading India, Accenture India's consulting business, and
Hmm.
he has to for work travel very frequently between Delhi and Bombay. So he found, in his free time at the airport, he browsed through the bookstore and found my book. Turned over, found that it was actually written by an IITian. Just for the sake of it, he bought it without much expectations. And through the plane, he actually read that book. And when he landed in Bombay, you won't believe he called up IIT Delhi Alumni Association in Delhi. And usually I'm kind of active, so everybody in the alumni association sort of knows me. So they shared my number. He called me up. He was so impressed with the whole idea and what he read, that he called me up for a IIT Delhi Alumni Association Gurgaon chapter meeting, where I actually delivered a talk in front of at least 30, 40
Wow.
other senior IITians.
So that's a really inspiring story, and definitely proves that writers are thought leaders. And you're not only influencing the younger generation, you're also influencing the much senior people, senior than us. So really, thanks a lot, Akshat, for sharing your story. I'll go to Karthik now. Karthik, you can hear us?
Yeah,
Yeah.
hi.
Hi, Karthik. So if you can share your story along the same lines, it will be really great. And a little bit about
Okay.
yourself to start with.
Thanks, Ashutosh. So I'm very happy to be here. So I am IIT Madras pass out from the batch of 2001. I mean, like
Wow.
many of the writers, I never had any dreams of ever becoming a writer. Even through my IIT days, I never thought I would become a writer. Then I went into software field. 5 years I worked, and that's when the seeds of the idea started happening. Because I used to give. I'm a voracious reader, but I used to love
Okay.
reading a lot, but I was never really into writing. So I
Hmm.
used to share some unique ideas on society and things like that, and do a more objective analysis of things. So some of my colleagues started telling me that you should consider writing. So I just tried. Things are not coming out so well. Then 2006, I went for my MBA at IIM Ahmedabad. Still, I didn't think about becoming a writer. So it was 2008 when I really started writing. I started my blog. That's when I said I'll test the
Okay.
waters. So I just wrote about my bride hunt experiences called the Great Indian Bride Hunt. That became so popular, like every day it was getting 1,000 hits. Well, it was just an anonymous blog. It was getting so much hits. Then I realized possibly I had some potential in this area. That's when I
Okay.
started to explore writing. I started writing a lot of blogs, and I kept writing. And then next I thought I will explore fiction. I started exploring fictions in my blog. They were getting good reception. So then I thought I start contributing to anthologies and literary magazines. I wrote a few stories. Again, they went well. Then 2013, I joined with a couple of my fellow writers and thought we will bring out a book together. And that book was a thriller. That's not exactly the what I really wanted to get to, but it was just to test the waters. It did very well again. But that's really thriller was not my genre at all. But then the other two authors wanted to go, so I went with it. Then 2018 was what I wrote something similar to what I really wanted to write, which was called Unfairy Tales. So they are the retelling of the Grimm's fairy tales with some changes to bring out some themes of modern interest. For example, I could change the Cinderella story to bring out that how small characters are impacted by social changes. See, we always read only about heroes. What about the small character? Here, for example, I uh, I mean, there are so many other things. There's the coachman, there is the mouse, there is so many different things. If from their point of view, how the story will look, any policy maker, decision maker, only thinks about the dominant sections of the society or of the only the most vocal sections of the society. What about the silent minority? How they think of the whole thing? So I put the Cinderella story like that. Similarly, then I took the Pied Piper of Hamilton story, and instead of talking about just the mice and the Pied Piper, I took Pied Piper as a force of a natural force affecting the society, and how politics is played in that whole thing, and how the whole politics of Hamilton society emerges through that whole story.
Wow.
So for me, I see stories. I think I told you also. For me, like I see engineers are good at storytelling because way I see story as a simulator, a model. I see as a model of a society. So I just I create the this thing, a toy model of the real society and my story, and then I introduce changes to it and show how it plays out. So that's just a simulator to try out ideas. It's like a thought experiment. That's how I see stories as. So that way it really worked, just trying some stories. That Unfairy Tales was very popular. And though the name fairy tales, I really never intended it to go to children. But it so happened just because of the name and the way it was this one, somehow it was felt that it's children's books and a lot of mothers and people picked it up. And there are a lot of people who run workshops for children. So those people, I think it's not really a book that can be read by children on their own, but as a guided reading, it really worked. I mean, they could show those stories and bring them concepts to them, things like feminism, things like environment protection, things like that. They could actually bring it out through my stories, that concept. So that became very popular. Of course, adults enjoyed it also. And actually, they say if you self-publish a book, uh, publishers won't touch it with a bark scroll. But for me, what happened was seeing the popularity, publisher actually came to me and they asked me that they wanted to pick up my book for publishing.
Wow. That's a great
So
achievement.
then I said, go ahead. And then the editorial team liked it a lot. And it was almost in the final round of publishing. But what happened is the marketing team got a bit confused how to position it in the market. They felt for children, it is a bit too advanced for direct reading. And adults, they felt might not be really picking up this book. But still, on the own, I was able to really sell this book really well. So I went ahead and published the second volume, More Unfairy Tales, which was even more successful.
Okay.
So I think it's been really a good journey doing these books. I think I'll write more in these stories, and I'm also having multiple other ideas on similar lines to try out experiments of concepts in a story mode and trying to bring out that whole. Because the thought leadership, what happens is people tend to preach. They say this is how you should do, this is how you should do, and that doesn't sit well with people. Nobody wants to listen
Yeah.
to other people tell them how to live. Instead, what a story does is it's like the Inception movie, setting an idea in somebody's mind. You just put a story, put the thing, and show if you do this is what happens. Put a story and show it to them. So people get the idea. They take what they want from it. It's not like
Exactly.
you
Yeah.
tell them this is how you should live life, this is how you should do. Then people say, who are you to tell me all this?
Correct.
So that's the
Correct.
way I see how I will impact. So that's
Yes.
what.
The big thing that I learned when I was getting into writing was, everywhere the editors tell you, you show, don't tell. Showing and not telling is
Yeah,
something which
right.
people tell, and I think that seems to have worked in your favor. And your story sounds very similar to this Robin Sharma also. If you remember, if you know his first book, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari, he actually self-published it, and he was selling it himself. If you read his story, he was selling it himself outside the metro stations and malls and everywhere with his father, using his car's boot as a store. And then actually, after the book became very popular, some reputed publisher actually picked it up, and then it became, obviously it went on to create history. So really very well done. And as I asked Akshat, do you have any kind of feedback coming through from your readers or people who have either children or the adults who have used your book? You have, what kind of fan mail, so to say, have you experienced, and
Uh,
what do you think about that?
I get so many videos, like children saying that how much this thing some people send. I never really saw these people even as a market segment when I wrote the book. So many
Hmm.
workshops got conducted, and then they called me to actually address those children and actually to see the adulation of those children, like we are talking to a real author, and see the
Wow.
happy and how excited the children get when they talk to you. You really
Hmm.
feel that you've really done something. I mean, you really feel like it's. I mean, they're all like you feel a kind of whole celebrity feeling, you get, and they were also really into the depth of the story. They were saying, why did this person did like this? Why shouldn't have done like that? I felt so sorry
Yes.
for this character. I mean, you feel they've really got into the whole,
Hmm.
into the story that they feel it's real for them. That's the success of a story writer, right?
Yes, yes, really great. So, it really brings out another point that while Akshat, we saw that he's been able to influence people who are about 20 years his senior from IIT, and you have reached out to an unintended audience, which is the children, which you actually never wanted to reach in the first place, but definitely it has rang a bell over there. So it's really goes to show that authors' strength as thought leaders in the society, whichever segment you want, you can influence with your words. Thanks a lot, Karthik, for sharing your experiences. I will now go to Harsh. Harsh has the distinction of being one of the youngest writers, published authors in the country. He published his book while he was still in IIT, just on the back of Chetan Bhagat's success in 2007-8. And he was actually in IIT at that time. He managed to get his book out, and it actually became a bestseller. So I leave the rest to Harsh to introduce himself, to talk about his writing journey, and he also became a full-time author. So let's hear more from him. Harsh, please, why don't you share your
Thank you.
experiences with us?
Thank you, Ashutosh. It's really nice listening to both Akshat and Karthik, and of course, your experience adds icing on the cake. Uh, my journey was very interesting because it came at a time in 2007 when there were two revolutions happening in the country, and they were both by IIT Delhi alumni, our alumni basically. So one revolution was Chetan Bhagat had just arrived, and he somehow managed to make India read. At that time, I mean, that's what we pretty much said, because earlier, before Chetan Bhagat, most of the people who would read were very, very refined, anglicized audience reading books which were primarily written for the Western audience. Even the popular fiction work like Inscrutable Americans were essentially about targeting the Western audience, teaching them about India rather than about
Mhm,
Indian
mhm,
audience and India primarily. So this was the first revolution that was happening. The second was Flipkart had come and e-commerce had just arrived. Net banking was the thing. So I arrived in the campus at the cusp of these two digital revolution as well as the publishing revolution. And much like everybody else, I started blogging. And one of the reasons why I started blogging is actually quite funny. I hail from a city called Dhanbad. I think Pratik was my school senior. We were also schoolmates. And from Dhanbad, I was not very confident about speaking in English, unlike Pratik, who is excellent speaker. And I was very, very conscious about speaking in English because other people in Delhi would speak such fluent English. And I wanted to tell them, hey, you know what? I also know English. I have been educated in English medium. And I couldn't tell that verbally. So I started blogging primarily to tell my friends that, hey, I know English. So that was the first impetus to start blogging. And I wrote these really, really boring philosophical musings, pretentious philosophical musings, which nobody read. And I remember at that time, yeah, at that time, one of our seniors, Tushar Raheja, had written a book called Anything for You, Ma'am. And it became a bestseller, and it was a rom-com. And by chance, I got involved with somebody. I had my first girlfriend in my second year of IIT. So I was like, there's something that I can
Wow.
do here, because I was this shy nerd who was sort of seeing somebody from Delhi University. So I just fictionalized a rom-com, a comedy of errors. On the first date, this nerdy guy goes to meet this Delhi University woman, and a lot of shit happens during the whole course of the day. So it's entirely a day's journey in a book, which was aptly titled Oops. And I wrote it on my blog. And much like I think Karthik, the blog became really, really popular. It started getting 1,000, 2,000 hits a day. Everybody would anticipate where and when is the next chapter coming. So I kept writing it for 30 odd days, 30 chapters came, and it became a full fledged novel. And when this happened and the blog was really popular, I just emailed to a bunch of publishers who were publishing such books. And immediately, I think Shrishti is one of the publishers, which is both blamed as well as credited to making a lot of IITian into authors. And Shrishti immediately responded that, hey, we would like to publish you. But there are two clauses. One is you have to add the word love in the title somehow. So it became a corny oops, I fell in love, rather than the concise and apt oops. And the second thing was the word limit was 30,000 words at that time, which I wrote. So the Shrishti's publishers were like, make it at least 60,000 words so that the spine can be seen on the bookshelf. So Shrishti's, I think, main innovation in the publishing scene was they really cracked the railway station Wheeler and Company market. So most of their books were sold because all of us engineering students will go to our hometowns at least twice a semester. And during that time, the 2G was so slow and the net packs were not there. So we would pick a book, 99 rupees book or 100 rupees book, and we'll read on the way. And this is when my book came in. I was barely 18-year-old when my first book came in, and it was 2009. And I think over the next 6 months, the book became a bestseller. So to become a bestseller, a book has to cross the 10,000 landmark. And then my publisher started pressurizing me to write a sequel to the book because it was an open-ended. So I actually turned it into a trilogy, and the three book totally sold over 2 lakh copies over the next
Wow.
10 years. And I
Great.
remember in my third year, I was making enough money to pay my semester fees. I did not have to borrow money from my parents. And I also ended up gifting a lot of things to my girlfriend at that time, because I owed the story to her in a way, because she was the inspiration. So it was a very fascinating journey, but it also inspired me to do something which was very, very brave at that time and foolish as well. I think most of the things we do young are brave and foolish at the same time. So I ended up not sitting in campus placements, which was one of the, because I was earning around only 2.5 lakhs to 3 lakhs of royalty in a year. So I was like, maximum I can survive now, 20,000 is coming. And I started up a company in my fourth year, which did not really work out. And then I went full time with it. In 7 months, we had to fold the company, and then I took a gap year and traveled across India on a shoestring budget. I also managed to raise some corporate sponsorship, and the intent was to become a better writer, and that's when I essentially became a full time writer. So during that time, I started freelancing for the Hindu. I wrote a bunch of features about various places I visited. For example, that time gangs of Wasipur had come, and because I hailed from Dhanbad, I went to Wasipur, uncovered the real story, and contrasted that with the real story. And it became the cover story on the Hindu Sunday magazine. And thereafter, I also wrote a cover story for Tehelka, which traced my journey as an IITian author, how impressionable I was, and how do I feel now that I have learned how to write better. I sort of had the regret of starting too early. I think all the people who want to be writers do write and do read, but don't hurry into your publishing. I think it's always better to look back and see your starting point as something which is not mediocre. I mean, and one of the other problems that happen if you publish too early is publishers start to sort of blanket you with the kind of books you have written. So when I was trying to pitch my travel book to my publishers, they were not willing to buy it because they're like, go back to rom-com. There's a ready market which wants to read you. And I'm like, I have evolved as a reader. I now write I want to write serious fiction. I want to write narrative nonfiction. And they did not take me seriously. So one of the advice for all the people who are watching this is, if you're a writer, read a lot and write a lot, but don't hurry yourself into publishing. Wait for a while. At least 24, 25 is a good time. When you are just in your college without having really seen the world, it's not really the greatest time. And one of the things that happened because of skipping campus placement was I learned how to hustle, how to find ways to make money. And that really came handy much later when I started up my own company and had to bootstrap for 2 years. Without funding, we had to run as co-founders, me and my co-founder from IIT Delhi. So, um, so we managed to pull that out because of the learnings of hustle, and finding ways to figure out uh, survival as an entrepreneur. So that really came from writing. So I got schooled in entrepreneurship not because of doing an MBA or anything like that, but instead of becoming a full-time writer and learning to be comfortable with the idea of unknown. So that's been pretty much my journey. And I right now run a company called Your Code, which is a mobile blogging platform. And we are one of India's largest microblogging platform with around 5 million users. So
Okay.
that's been pretty
And
much my journey.
would you like to share any of the reader feedback, how you've been able to influence your
Sure.
target audience?
Sure. So unlike the other two gentlemen before me, I want to share something really funny. So I got a mail called "Your novel sucks" uh, after writing my first book, and there was this lady who was very kind enough to point out what were the cringe-worthy moments in my novel and how this sentence could have been written better. And it was really, I mean, very disappointing for me as a writer because somebody is sending such a nasty and notorious mail. But I managed to reply with very much of grace, and this person later turned out to become an editor of my subsequent books because she was so good in her feedback. So I managed to onboard her as an editor, and my latter books, because she edited, became much better than they could have been earlier. So
Okay,
that's
I think that's a
yeah.
great story. So I'll thanks a lot, Harsh. I will now
Thank
move
you.
to Pratik. So Pratik has joined us more as a thought leader, as I said in the beginning. He's not an author in the conventional sense, but he does write. Let's hear from him. What kind of stuff he likes to write, a little bit about himself, and how does he feel that he's influencing the target audience of the country. Yeah, Pratik, why don't you go ahead?
Thanks, Ashutosh. So it's funny that both I know both Abhishek and Harsh quite well. I used to spend a lot of time with Abhishek in the reading room of IIT Delhi, and used to discuss a lot of stuff. And Harsh, of course, is my junior from college and undergrad. I mean, I was in IITD. Akshat, I'm sorry. And Harsh is my junior at undergrad, and I'm from the 2010 batch. So I have been in this exploratory artistic kind of stuff for a while, but I took the more conventional route. I went on to do a PhD and so forth, and then I came back to India, joining IIM Bangalore, and I think thought leadership or is what I guess academics are supposed to do. And I would like to follow up on what Harsh was talking about, that actually in this world there is no dearth of writers per se. There are a lot of writers who are writing in all sorts of places, and there are a lot of influencers, both good and bad. And given that, I think uh, I believe that when we write, we should have a little bit of more restraint and a little bit of more peer review and a little bit of more research that comes with the backing. And I do definitely think that there is a scope for both kinds of writings. One is the more, the kind of writing that people do on the go, and the other kind of writing, which is the academic writing, which is more measured. And academic writing is very different from writing a novel or even writing a piece of journalism, because it requires, so for every line that you write, you have to ultimately have a lot of research in the background. And research is not just about uncovering a fact, it's also about doing all sorts of econometric tests, causality, endogeneity tests, and so forth, looking at alternate hypotheses, etc., etc. So the body of work that goes in after which you write a paper or a book is just incredibly large. So, which means that, you know, the volume of stuff that you would write would be fewer but measured. So I do believe, and it's not easy to do that in the sense that we always have this urge to give an opinion or to express what we feel like. And I do have that urge to be expressive. However, I think there's a value that some people in society should be measured and do the testing and the empirics in place before they make an argument, so that you know, whatever they say is properly vetted in a certain sense. So but nonetheless, I think while, you know, of course, publications in journals is one sort of thing, I do try to write in newspapers now. Especially these days, I write for Hindi newspapers, and that comes out because of the fact that I now realize that nobody reads journals, and even if I write a very well you know, reviewed book which gets published in, say, you know, a top university press, even that is not read by people that very much. These are dense readings which tend to be boring. But at the same time, I don't think we, as academics, we should be ceding the ground to Twitter, where, you know, all sorts of influencers are out there sharing all kinds of bad and poisonous ideas sometimes. And it's important that to get your ideas, my own ideas out. Okay, when I write for a newspaper, it would not be the most, it would not be peer reviewed per se, but at least it would hopefully have a little bit more rigor in comparison to what what, you know, the ideas we see around. So I definitely have a little bit of dissatisfaction with the marketplace for ideas we have right now in this country. I think it can significantly improve, and my goal is to slowly try to do that improvement. Yeah.
Okay, thanks a lot, Pratik, for sharing this with us. So I'll go last. Since I've been invited to this, I have also a background in authoring. I'm a pass out from IIT Delhi in '97 batch. After that, I was pretty much a banker in you know, investment banks like Deutsche Bank, Goldman Sachs for about 15 years. Still a banker working for a large Australian bank. But in 2013, sometime 2013-14, I got bitten by the writing bug. And as you know, Karthik said that many people don't like to be told about how they should lead their life, and you know, those kind of things. But my first book, or the idea that I had, was precisely about telling people how to lead their lives. And I thought, let me write it because I feel maybe majority of the people don't want to be told, but still there will be a kind of a segment for self-help readers who are looking for some kind of guidance. And that book was published in 2017. It is called Happiness is All We Want, and it was published by Bloomsbury. They are the publishers of Harry Potter. And actually, I got lucky with such a great global publisher because a lot of people have written very good books. They find it very hard to reach out to publishers. And my second book, after the first book, I also realized that I need to develop more as a writer, and you know, I again wanted to write some more. So I got into fiction genre, and my second book was published earlier in 2020, which is called Banker's Game. So it is a banking come corporate fiction suitable for all professionals, surely. And my target audience has been more of a younger professionals, younger crowd. And I feel that, you know, yes, with these two books, I have been able to influence to some extent. I get sometimes, once in a while, I get with these mails. Unlike Karthik, who is a celebrity in his own words, but I get mails times, maybe once in a week or twice in a month, kind of mails, where people share some good feedback that, you know, how the book has impacted their life. First book, Happiness is All We Want, is more about the holistic well-being space. And I feel we have today's world, we have too much plethora of information and ideas. But this book was more about telling people or showing them the path how to implement those ideas, right? So everybody is free to do their, you know, verifications or proofs about what they want to adopt. But once you've done all your research and all that, please do something. That was the message of that book. And the second book being the corporate fiction, a lot of young professionals have written to me. They've liked the storyline. They've seen exactly those things happening in their work life. And there's a very interesting episode of Lehman Brothers crash, which is actually in the background of that book, which is in the banking industry. So people feel Lehman was something which happened in US, and US economy took a beating, but actually it impacted the banking sector in India also, and that also comes out in that book. So that was pretty much my writing journey, and what I've tried to do as an author. I still continue to work in a bank, and writing is more like a part-time hobby for me. Maybe when I become a full-time writer, I can become a more dense writer, as Harsh mentioned, or as Pratik mentioned. So maybe very quickly, we are in the last 10 minutes of the session. So if I'm sure there will be many people in the session who are writing something, or they want to write something. And this one obvious question that comes to people's mind, how to go about publishing and more the commercial side of it. A lot of people still feel, and these things have changed in last 5 years with the advent of YouTube and all that. And a lot of people who were reading those books have shifted towards the online viewing of the videos and the content. So maybe Harsh, if I can ask you, because you were the first one to jump into this field and on a commercial basis and became a full-time writer, if I can ask you about some tips on the commercial side of writing or authoring a book, what will be your tips for our audience?
Right. So I burnt my fingers by jumping into it, and while it taught me everything I know today, but it's not something you would want to do, because just to give you an idea, that even to publish with the Hindu, the cover story gave me a royalty of around 3,500 rupees, barely. And I had to bargain for 500 extra rupees because I had spent that kind of money in my travel, and they were not willing to give. So freelance writing, by the way, is very, very difficult, because first you will get tons of rejections, and barely 4 to 5,000 rupees per article. Even if you end up writing 4 to 5 articles a month, then it is barely around 20,000 rupees, which is not enough for survival. So freelance writing is something that, like Pratik is doing on the sides while he's employed with a company, or I think even any kind of columns or features that you want to write, you should be doing on the side, and figure out one area of expertise where you really understand something. For me, it was travel, because I was on the ground going so many places. Now I can write about business and startup side of things, because I've been running a startup. So one of the things that I learned is full-time writing is a beast. It's not something that you can pull off until and unless you already have 1 or 2 books which are sold in millions. I mean, I sold 1 lakh copies, but over a period of 5 years. So think of 20,000 copies a year, which is not really great, because it starts to taper off. Your first year sale will be 15,000 copy. Next year sale will be 5,000 copies, because new books will fill the bookshops, and people won't be seeing your books as often. And if you keep writing new books, and if it is only a 20,000 copies range, rather than hitting a ballpark number like 2 lakh copies or 5 lakh copies for each, if it is not growing, then your royalties will start receding, and you'll have to figure out a way to earn. So one of the things that I suggest all the people is, now the market is so staggered that you have to work towards building your brand. Look at the bestsellers in the current market. Rupi Kaur is a bestseller. Who was Rupi Kaur? She was an Instagram celebrity. Twinkle Khanna is a bestseller. Who is Twinkle Khanna? She is already a celebrity. So now even publishers, if for commercial successes, they're looking at Instagram celebrities, Twitter celebrities, TikTok celebrity. I don't think TikTok celebrities will be able to write a book, by the way, but that's the core ecosystem that build a brand in any of the subject. Like Pratik might be writing a book on strategy, business strategy, because he has the credence of being a professor at IIM Bangalore, and he has a portfolio of work. You can write a book about banking because you have that kind of depth of experience. So figure out that niche first, and go deeper into it, and build a brand for yourself as a thought leader. A lot of people in the US are doing newsletters now, and companies like Substack is a great idea of creating your follower base. In fact, one of the authors called James Clear, who wrote the book Atomic Habits, started out as a newsletter writer. His newsletter subscribers grew to 600,000 users. And then a big publisher came in and published, and it became an instant bestseller. So that's the way to approach if you're doing anything now. That first build your brand on any of the social networks, and through that turn it around. Even John Green has a very, very avid YouTube channel called Crash Course, and through that he built his brand, and thereafter he started writing and publishing his books. Okay. So figure out social media, basically.
Yeah. Thanks, Harsh, for all your pearls of wisdom. Really, you've condensed your experience of about 10 odd years in this field. I'll go back to Karthik. Karthik, you want to add something to what Harsh said? Because a lot of people get into writing, thought influence is one thing, but there's always a commercial angle and you're investing your time and effort. So what will be your advice to, people and authors who are looking at this field?
So I think in some way I will continue on what Harsh said, because see, I think now it's about building your personal brand on one core area. So you should write about things you know and earn that brand, and then you can, based on that, you can go and sell more of it. So that's why one of the things I'm also thinking, the next one I'm going to bring it. I am in the management consulting field. So the next novel which I'm currently working on is called Heroism Consultants. So consulting is something I know about. So I'm going to now take some consultants and put them in ancient Greece, and I'm just going to write a story on how the whole thing is going to play out. But with still I have something to talk about because I know consulting. So that's the way I think to build the personal brand around things. And I think starting with the blog and things like that, social media is again a very strong thing, because thing that helped me was I had a good network built up. As I told you, I started blogging in 2008. So since 2008, and my unfair attempts came down in 2018. So I had built a connect on social media over 10 years, which was one of the things where it could put the initial momentum. I mean, some blind said a line that if you wink at a girl in a dark room, it doesn't help because no one is going to see it. So you need a base, small critical mass who are able to read the book, and then after that, the word of mouth picks up. If you're a quality writer, the word of mouth picks up from there and it starts rolling. But to build that critical mass, see, your own personal social circles are not going to be a thing. In
Yeah,
Hindi, you people have a proverb, Gar ki murgi, dal barabar. So your own friends are not going to be there selling their books for you. Only this, and in the social network also it says only the secondary contacts help. When researchers showed, your immediate friends are not going to help you get your jobs. Only the secondary circles are going to help. That comes only through the social media. They are only going to be the ones who are going to really advocate your books. So that way, in the way, it's kind of reflection, I think, repetition of what Harsh was saying.
Thanks a lot, Karthik. Really great to hear your thoughts. And I hope all our audience today would have benefited from these experiences that we have shared here. We are really at the end of our time today. And it was really nice to interact with you. It was a lot to learn from each of your experiences. And, it will definitely help me in my writing journey. And I hope all the audience also benefit from this. And again, thanks for coming over here. Really great to be part of this IIT 2020 event. I hope the event has all the success. And that's it. Thanks a lot, everyone, for joining us.